Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Salvatore Bruno. Join me in discovering the mindset into fitness, nutrition and wellness, where I'll be answering your questions, interviewing the top names and leaders in the game, and of course, I'll be getting their stories on how they get motivated to become the best. You'll find it right here on Bruno Talks. Hello and welcome. My guest this evening is a local triathlete. We're going to be discussing from where she started, how it all came about to actually physically doing these triathletes, and to eventually actually becoming the first female across the line. My guest this evening is Natalie. Hello, Natalie.
Hello.
I'm going to call you Nat, just to make it really easy.
Perfect.
How you doing? You right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. So I'm like I do with everyone, but first question straight out of the block. Where did it all start for you then?
So as a child, I didn't do any triathlon. It wasn't a sport I knew at all. Probably talking back just over 2 years ago, back in 2017, I had quite a major hip operation.
Yep.
So before that, I couldn't run at all. Maybe run 5k every few weeks, but it was just so painful. So I had a big hip operation, sorted that out, and then I moved to Slough, had a job in London, and I was like, right, I want to meet some new people. So looked around for like basically a new hobby.
Yep.
Like no focus on triathlon. Found a local club and was like, oh, well, it seems like something quite outdoorsy, something bit of fun. Let's give it a go. And I literally joined this local club, like just having been cleared by the consultant to start exercise again. Still couldn't run, and I wasn't able to run for probably the first 2 months I started.
Wow.
And just threw myself into it. Literally didn't think anything of it and just kind of got sucked in.
And did you know what a triathlon essentially was? I mean, did you know what you were going in for?
So I think the most I'd seen it on the telly, I think it was the World Championships, like that summer while I was recovering. And I just thought it just looked awful. I was like, you're wet. You come off and you have to get on the bike and you're wet and your feet are wet, which means your socks and your shoes. And I just remember thinking, like, this just looks the most bizarre sport. I don't know. But somehow I was like, I almost joined a triathlon club without thinking anywhere towards an end goal of actually doing a triathlon. It really was just as like, oh, just have a hobby to get out and meet new people. Yeah. Like, did not think through that at all. I didn't have any of the right kit, like, just give it a go, basically. Yeah,
and prior to your, because I just want to go back to a little bit on your the hip operation and stuff like that. Yeah. Prior to that, you were doing another sport before, right?
Yeah, so I competitively boxed when I was younger. So that started, my brother started boxing just to like bit of anger relief, like just a bit of a hobby. And I started, right? Yeah. So I started to go down just to like see what happened, and I had a bit of a natural flair for it. So I was probably about 16 when I started boxing competitively. So I trained a couple of times a week, had a couple of fights and stuff like that, and I won all of them, did really well. But it was really just the problem I had with my hip then linked into my back, and I trapped the nerve a few times. I had like some quite nasty injuries that took a really long time to heal. So it was very much a sort of, I could do sort of a few months, then I'd get injured again and stuff. But I loved it at the time, and I was at a competitive level, and really enjoyed it. But it just wasn't all that sustainable.
And then what age were you when you were boxing?
Kind of. So I started when I was about 16. Did my first, quite young then. Yeah, so I was still at school, first competitive season, I was sort of 17, 18, and I did it, sort of dabbled with it through uni as well, but then when I started work again, it's much harder to go into an office with a black eye. Yeah, it doesn't really suit very well, so that's when it started to fade and start to pick up other
and I guess it's as all as, without sounding like bad or anything, but being female with a black eye, obviously, as well, it looks even worse. It
sort of screams domestic abuse as opposed to anything else. It doesn't. People look at you really funny. So yeah, it does not go down well in an office environment.
And then how did I just want to go into a little bit, because obviously for someone who's very active like yourself, to then be having a hip operation where you're essentially your mobile is you're done. You're stuck. I mean, how do you mentally deal with that before you even looked at the triathlete stuff?
So I think leading up to the hip operation, I'd trapped the nerve again. I was actually in Canada on a ski season, so I was like absolutely like peak of life. It was just that perfect opportunity. It was amazing. And then I trapped the nerve in my hip and I was in agony. I was out there for weeks and I could barely sleep. I literally couldn't really walk. Like, it was just so painful. And I think you kind of, being in pain all the time is really difficult.
Yeah.
It sort of numbs your emotions a bit. And so I sort of spent a few months, really. I just moved back home, almost waited for the operation then. And it was about 2.5 months between sort of the initial trapping of the nerve, getting back home, seeing the consultant, and getting a date in for the surgery. And I think after, leading up to that and then after the operation, it was all just focused on rehab, because you're so used to being in pain by that point. Nothing else really matters. And
it's only going to get better, man.
Yeah, exactly. And after the operation, I was so tired all the time. Like, obviously healing takes a really long time, and all I did for about a month was just eat and sleep and do my physio exercises, and that was it. It was almost shut down to it all. Didn't really think it through that much. Didn't worry about it. It was just, it was what it was. You get on with it, and then hopefully it'll be better. But I think almost immediately that coming out the other side, and it was a really slow process, I was completely non-weight bearing for a month, and then it took a good 3 months till I could actually even consider starting to do anything more than like walk in a very slow static bike. The first time I got on a watt bike after my operation, the resistance couldn't go low enough. I literally couldn't pedal it on the lowest resistance without pain. I had to go to like the normal gym bikes just to get anything with low enough resistance. So it was just that really slow process. But yeah, I almost didn't stress about it. I almost just kind of shut it off and was like, it's what it is. You just get on with it and just see what happens after that.
And then did you have, like, obviously you had a recovery plan, but did they tell you like it was going to be like 3 months or a month that you wouldn't be able to do certain amount of things, or is it just like a learning curve as it went?
No, so you're very much, the first 3 months are very structured. So you have a month where you are pretty much completely on crutches. You can't do anything at all. Then you have another 2 months where it's all just hydrotherapy, so in the pool doing exercises, a little bit on the bike, and you start with literally 5 minutes of pedaling easy resistance, then 6 minutes, 7, 10.
So slowly building it up.
Yeah, really slowly. And then at 3 months you go back and see the consultant and they look, and from then you're starting to be able to walk and that sort of thing. That's when I was told I could start running just a little bit. So that was, again, like 5 minutes, really slow jog, then 6 minutes, etc., really building it up. And it was that point at 3 months that I joined a triathlon club, just to kind of start moving. But it's not till, I think it's 9 months that you get your full proper sign off. So that was like, the operation was in May, and I think it was like the end of February the following year.
So we're talking now 2018. 18.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That I was actually properly signed up. By which point I was like, pretty much like, I was cycling loads. I was doing like full training by that point. But the consultant was like, it's fine. He was like, not a problem at all. It's actually really good. You won't cause any issues, which was probably good to hear because I was doing it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a very slow process. It's not, you're talking like 9 months full recovery, and even then, even now, it's still more rehab and stuff like that you think you have a weakness, and I definitely put more focus on strength work because it's something you never want to go through.
Yeah, of course.
So it's all about how do you prevent that in the future.
Yeah, and I guess and now, without jumping too far forward, you've essentially done some triathlons, you've got some under your belt, even winning one, which we'll discuss a little bit later on, a bit more into detail. But for the very first time you signed yourself up for one, I mean, how did you essentially train yourself for that, knowing that you've had this hip operation? Did you go into it kind of like, I'm okay, I'll be okay, or did you go over into it very easy? Or
so I think after, it only took a few months, and because I was so used to living with this like chronic pain. The pain was gone.
Ah, yeah.
So actually, I was like, this is the best thing ever. And I was doing full training, just like with the club, just doing bits. Like it wasn't really structured at all. Just doing club sessions, seeing what happened. But no, I really wasn't worried about it because it didn't hurt. And I know that if something's going wrong, your body tells you. Yeah. But it didn't. So, you know, that first season, I was like, this is literally the best thing ever. Because I could do all of this stuff without any pain at all. It was great.
And then, so in your, essentially, like you call it first season. Now, I'm very, as you know, I'm not into triathlon. It scares me every time we talk about it. But, you know, so when you go into a group like triathlons and stuff like that, I mean, when you say seasons, I know that we've already had this conversation about what you're going to be doing for 2020. But your first season, how many triathlons were you aiming to do or did you do?
I did 3.
Okay.
So initially I was aiming to do 2. So the first one I signed up for was just like a baby sprint triathlon.
Yeah.
But not, I say baby sprint in terms of like sprint triathlon, if you're doing it competitively, is super tough. Like I can't think of anything worse.
Yeah, and I think we need to go into a little bit and tell the listeners what's going on here, because for people who are listening don't understand what a triathlon is.
Yeah.
Let alone what you classify as little and what I classify as little.
It's quite different.
So, for example, a baby triathlon or a baby sprint triathlon, you call it?
Yeah, so you go down to like super sprint, which is, they're really short. Okay. It's something like a couple of 100-meter swim, maybe 10k on the bike and like 2.5 kilometers run or something.
Because that's essentially the order of a triathlon, right?
Yeah, so swim, bike, run.
Swim, bike, run.
Yeah.
Always.
Always swim, bike, run.
It's kind of a combination which I know we've had this conversation before, where I can't mentally understand how you can prepare yourself in 3 different activities for the same race, because they are essentially races. Yeah,
it's very competitive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So this was the first one that you ever did?
Yeah, so I did a sprint triathlon. I did it at Glendon Palace, which as a beginner triathlon's perfect. It's in the courtyard of Glendon Palace, your transition area. Wow, yeah. It's absolutely stunning, great support, and I think it was 750 metres swim, I think 20 kilometres on the bike, and a 5k run. So it took me about an hour and a half. I had no idea what was happening. You just go with it. Everyone else goes with it. You just sort of run around, give it a go. I had quite a few friends there who were doing it on the same day, so it was really just for fun. And
did you have much preparation for that? Because even that, to me, sounds... I know there'll be listeners going, that actually sounds quite difficult. And I know you're quite blasé about these things, but that, I mean, what kind of preparation did you have for just for that, for example?
So I wasn't training for short distance. I'd already signed up for later in the season for a longer distance. My focus was already on the longer stuff. The idea of going really, really hard for like an hour and a half, I just think is far worse for some unknown reason than doing something that's slightly less hard for like 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
But I was always more motivated by the longer stuff. So I was kind of training for that sort of longer race in August, and this was more just like almost to see, because your transitions, you know, you've got to get out of the water, out of a wetsuit, you've then got to put your bike kit on, and there's certain things like you have to have your helmet on first, and you then have to get your shoes on, and trying to work out how you do all this stuff, what works and what doesn't. And in terms of kit and what fits, what's going to rub and all of that, it's really good to do the shorter distances to just work out almost what fits and what works, and then you can then
like a tester, essentially.
It's just a test to see what happens, because if you get that wrong in a longer race and you've got the wrong clothes on, or you know, something like that, and something starts to chafe, it's gonna hurt a lot less over 5k than 20k. I know. You know, don't wear pants with cycling shorts, I think is what Bruno's getting at.
And so moving along with that, we're going to talk about it a bit later on. But so you already had your main focus, which is the bigger one.
Yeah.
And the bigger one was what?
So it's called middle distance triathlon, which makes it sound much easier. So it's either called middle distance. I usually call it 70.3, which is the distance in miles. or it can be called a half Ironman. So that's a 1.2 mile swim, then 56 mile bike ride, and then a half marathon, so 13.1 mile run. So it's quite a big one, and I signed up for it like I think I'm completely insane. I was like, almost can't even comprehend it. I was like, I can probably just about do all the elements. Let's just give it a go. Let's sign up. And I dragged a load of my friends along with me. So there were a couple of us who were all for the first time doing that distance.
Wow.
We almost sort of bullied each other into it. But it was great. It was...
Because essentially, pen to paper, there's a lot of elements in that race that essentially some people can't do one item of. Like, for example, like half a marathon.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't run half a marathon, let alone I've done the bike ride before or the swim. Yeah. So, and I know we've had this conversation about the mindset of how you think about things, and you're quite laid back about it. Yeah. But do you find that your approach of going into something like this, where you do have that kind of blasé approach, helps you more, rather than you don't have to worry about it so much?
Yeah, I think it sort of comes across as quite a laid back approach. And actually about the race itself, I am quite laid back. So by the time you get to race day and to sort of that tapering in the week before the race, I am quite relaxed. Yeah. I've done what I can. Why would I stress about it? Yeah. But I do worry about the training. So during training and in those months leading up to it, I'm far more stressed than I ever am during the race. Right, okay.
So it's kind of like a bit of a reversal, where most people will be actually stressed about the actual event. Yeah. Where your stress is coming out during essentially your training.
Because if you get the training wrong, your race is going to be awful. Yeah. But by the time you've got to the race day, you've put that work in and you know you're going to get the result you deserve, which if you've put the work in, even if something goes a bit wrong, you've done it already. Yeah, and so almost the hard part's done. This is just seeing what you can do.
So you're actually entering the race quite confident that you are able to do
I wouldn't say confident.
Well, maybe not the right word to use, but in the sense that, well, no, it could be, because essentially you know your abilities. So like you said, if you've done your training and so on, you then enter this race, which is a monster of a race, even though it's half the distance. And how do you place in that? How do you...
I can't remember how I placed within. So triathlon's done in age groups, so different to other sports. Most sports you just get like first, second, third, whereas they split you into your age groups, so in 5-year chunks. So I think it starts at usually 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34 upwards, and you will place, so there'll be an overall race winner, but then there's also winners in the age group, because it's you get people from anywhere from kind of 18 up to 70 doing these races, so it's really hard to compare people. So you put them into age groups. I honestly wouldn't know how I placed within my age group. I'm not entirely sure. That wasn't something I was really worried about, because I was like, I just want to do the distance, see what happens, if I can actually do it.
And I take it you did complete the distance.
I did it in a good time as well. So it took me 5 hours 23 minutes to
do the whole lot.
Yeah, I had my bike split, it's quite a flat course. I think I averaged about 21 miles an hour during the bike. Wow. So that was about 2 hours 40 minutes for the bike, which is 56 miles in that time's quite good. And then I think I also PB'd on the half marathon that season, about 1 hour 55. Wow. So it went really well. I was really pleased with it, and I got to the end and I was like, absolutely loved every second. And it was at that point after that first race that I thought, I want to go longer. This is not long enough. I want to do more.
And I'll take it because we obviously know where it went from there. Yeah. But for the listeners, I mean, so you do this essentially. You know that there's races out there that are longer. Yeah. You've got full Ironman and so on, or an Ironman races, and then they're all around the world. Yeah. So where did you decide to go from that point?
So at that point, I was like, I know I want to go longer, but it's not. That race was in August, so it's not quite the end of the season. So I signed up for another half Ironman distance called Triathlon X, and that was in the Lake District. It's one of the hardest in the world. And I did make the slight mistake of just not really doing any training between those two. I was like, oh, it's recovery. Oh, it's fine. Like, let's not worry about the 30% gradient.
Sum up the Nat that I know.
Like, it'll be fine. So I went in with a very blasé attitude, and it was super hard. The water temperature is absolutely freezing. Wow. So I came out the water and I was like completely shivering. It took me 15 minutes to actually put on cycling clothes because I was so cold. This man in transition felt so sorry for me. He gave me like a thermos of like hot juice that he had actually taken for his own son, that he felt so sorry for me, he gave it to me instead. And then the bike was it was a really tough course. They did it the same day as like a classic car convention. There was oil all over the road. Wow. As soon as you stop on like a 30% gradient, you just can't get back on. So the bike took forever. I just about made it back in terms of transition to go out on the run, and the run was a mountain run. So it was literally, you just went out of it's up in the Lake District. You went out, you ran up a hill.
Because there's no flats out there.
Yeah, I think it was something like 1,000 meters of elevation on the run, or something. It was really hilly. So you kind of hike up, and there's sideways hail. It was absolute carnage in terms of weather. And it's a mountain run. You have to have mandatory mountain kit. You have to carry a pack with waterproofs in it, with an emergency survival blanket, certain amounts of water, food, whistle, like all of this stuff, just in case.
This is like a whole new level.
A whole new level. Yeah, which I was just not ready for. Like, I just kind of went for it. But the run, even though it was a tough run, I loved it. I loved every second. And it was after that I thought, I want to do longer, but I want to do this type of race. I want to do the more extreme triathlons. I was like, this is what I enjoy.
And when exactly was this after the Blenheim race?
So Blenheim is June, and this was the end of September. So a decent chunk of time. It's like quite a big gap, like months. And this is all in 2018, right? Because then it takes you, and then it took you. So then, was that the last race of that year, or so that was the last.
Another one in?
That was the end of the season at that point. So that was kind of like that was just a bit of fun at the end of the season, really.
As you do.
Why not?
And then you started to plan for your following year, I guess.
Yeah. So I got back from that race, and I started to look up more extreme triathlons. And I think within a week of having finished that race, I signed up for the next year's challenge, which was a full distance. It's called the Brutal. It's in Snowdonia in Wales. It was voted the world's hardest full distance triathlon in 2017. And It was savage. And when I signed up for it, it's that sort of level that I signed up, I put my name on the list. I looked at the registration. I was the 13th person to sign up, which I was like, oh, good, that's a lucky number. And it was, I know, I was like, great. But it was that sort of scale of challenge that makes you feel like slightly nauseous, because I'm like, I can't see how I'm ever going to do that. But I was like, it's fine. It's like a year away. We'll worry about that another time. Yeah,
because I guess that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously even the name of the race.
Yeah.
I mean, Brutal. I mean, it kind of, that will put a lot of people off just in its case. But you've got the time, knowing that you've got this time to train and stuff like that. Did you literally sit down and work out a training plan that must have been done or had to be done, or did you just go as is?
So I didn't do any of it. That's what I have a coach for.
Yeah.
So
I know him.
Yeah, you know him. Same coach as you've got. So Seb, who is my coach, but also my boyfriend, which works well because he lives with me. He can't escape me.
Yeah.
So he started training me actually just before Blenheim.
Yeah.
I think the year before, or in or around that time. So he started coaching me then. So he'd coached me through that first season as well. When I signed up for the Brutal, it was then up to him to then almost plan back that training. And it does require a different level of training to even a normal Ironman. Dare you use that phrase, because it's definitely not normal, but it does require kind of an additional level of preparation for sure.
Because I think to a lot of our listeners, just talking about now what we're talking about with where you've increased it up to this and essentially going into a new season with this brutal kind of massive triathlon, you've then got the other bits and pieces that add in, which people don't know about, like how do you prepare what you're going to be eating, let alone like the food, knowing that because you have to train a lot. People don't realize how much you have to train in your training, let alone the actual race itself is being brutal, but the actual training itself. So food wise, before we start going into like your next season, because we've talked about this a lot off mic, but what I'd like to really kind of get out there is how you find yourself, because of what you eat, and how you find that to power you through and get you through these triathlons.
So eating for training as well as during a race are kind of two completely different things. So firstly, actually eating during a race is really hard, and that's something you have to train over a long time. If you've ever tried to even drink water while you're running, a lot of people get a stitch, you feel really sick. Try eating a sandwich while you're running.
I've done that.
Yeah, feel really ill.
It's horrible.
And that takes, I think you kind of underestimate how much time that takes. So you start on the bike. The bike's easier to eat because you're not quite as bouncy, but it takes a lot of time to get your body to accept food while you're running, and you've got to eat a lot. I think you aim for, looking at grams an hour, it's something like a gram per kilo of body weight an hour. So you're talking of just pure carbs, so it's a couple of 100 grams. We worked out for the brutal, I was going to need to eat nearly a kilo of sugar, pure sugar, not even with the rest of your calories around it. So you're talking energy bars, a couple of energy bars an hour. At the time I was still on liquid energy as well, whole packets of jelly babies. But you need to get your body, it's a lot, but you need to get your body to be able to accept it. So the training for that, you not only have the training in terms of your actual swim, bike, run, but then it's also, you go out on a long run and you've got to work out what can you eat that won't give you any stomach problems, you won't get a stitch or anything like that. So that also all plays into it. And for training, it's, especially I find it's pretty much how much can you eat, but it's all the right stuff. So it's the classic, I eat a lot of carbs. I eat pretty much all the carbs which I can get into my body. Loads of fruit, loads of veg. I don't eat meat at all.
I think that's one thing that I was trying to was going to go on to next. Was that you are a vegetarian. I'm vegetarian, and actually, so I only went vegetarian in May last year. And I was expecting, I went vegetarian for other reasons. It wasn't for performance, and I was 100% expecting a big drop. I was like, I've gone vegetarian. I was like, it will impact my performance, but I was like, it's fine. I can accept that. And I was actually really surprised. My performance absolutely went up. It got so much better. I felt lighter. I had more energy. And usually you'd expect the opposite. And actually I've almost gone the other way in that I eat very few animal products now at all. I eat pretty much not far off a vegan diet, which you think that'll never fuel you. It's that classic conception, but particularly in terms of ultra endurance, which is where I'm kind of headed towards now, it's quite common. It seems that when you're doing these really long events, your body, it doesn't do well with stuff that's hard to digest. Meat's really hard to digest. All your classic animal proteins are, whereas sort of carbs and fruit and veg and stuff like that, they're much lighter. They give you energy. Like I'll sit and eat a really high carb meal, and most people are like, oh, I couldn't have pasta at lunchtime. I'd be so tired in the afternoon. But I find that it gives me energy. So I'll eat a big bowl of pasta and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to run. Because we've had this conversation before about our different types of way that we look at nutrition and foods. And we live a very different lifestyle in the way that you live. like you don't actually count your calories or your macros, and I the way we do it is, you know, for the industry that we're in, we count our calories and so on.
Yeah.
And you essentially eat when you're hungry.
Yeah.
But when you train for something like this, obviously the repercussions, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago, is that when you finish, you end up finding that your body is needing the fuel for weeks after.
Yeah.
So even though you're preparing it while training, the food is constantly, it's like before, it's during, as well as after. But so for example, let's say someone is trying to get into a triathlon, you know, what would you, I mean, is there any like tips that you would get people to, if anybody asks you, how can I get started?
You've just got to get started. It depends what your background is. If you don't do any of them, which I pretty much didn't, some people will often come to it as like they have been a cyclist or a swimmer or a runner. I went into it as none of them.
Yeah.
I didn't go in being like, right, I'm a runner, I want to do some more. I just signed up to a local club, it's a great way if you really don't know where to start, if you don't know what distance you want to do, if you have no idea at all, joining a club is great because you'll meet people who do it, you'll learn a lot about the sport, but you'll also you'll get those ideas of actually, do I want to do a short distance? And, you know, do I want to go out and do an hour and a half really hard, absolutely flog myself? Or do I want to do the longer stuff? Is it more that mental game and that really long process? And I think then once you know what you want to do, it's then finding a coach. It makes a really big difference. A lot of people, I don't think they appreciate how much of a difference that personalised training and that structured training. They're like, oh, I'll just get a training plan.
Yeah.
And it's not the same. The differences you have between, you know, your lifestyle, gender, age, all of that sort of thing, how stressed you get at work, they all play into it. And without someone who can look at it objectively from the outside, you'll never get the same performance. You just can't.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And even though he's sitting here in the room, and also my coach, you know, I totally agree with that. Because even though with my knowledge of what I believe my body could do and stuff like that, when it came to cycling, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So it was having that person that could not only had the knowledge, but it's that accountability as well of someone saying to you, right, you have to do this. And I remember that my training plan, when he used to send it through for this challenge this year, was just like, damn. Yeah,
because you always, if you do your own coaching, you always miss out the stuff you don't want to do. There's the stuff you find really hard, and self-motivating yourself to do stuff. And often it's really hard to identify the bits which you need to work on.
Yeah.
And even if you know, they're always the first ones that are going to drop. You've got a busy day, I'll skip that threshold session that I don't like.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if I have a busy day or I can't make it to work, Seb will be like, right, we'll rearrange, and he can prioritise it objectively, as opposed to, you know, you'll always prioritise on what you want to do. Of course you will. It's human nature, and you just can't step back from it. Yeah,
because that's one thing that I want to make sure that I talk about as well, is that you do have a full-time job. This is not something you do you just train all day long.
No,
you physically get up, you go to work, and then you have to put your training, like most, around essentially your working and your social life.
Yeah, and I don't work a 9 to 5 either. I travel a lot with work.
Yeah.
I'm out the office a few days a week. I'll regularly go up and back to Manchester in a day, spending many hours just sat on a train, which isn't great for your body.
Yeah.
So I do have a very busy life, and it's training smarter. It's making sure that you've got time to fit it round. You know, I probably train a lot less in the week than people think I do. I probably do maybe 5-6 hours during the week.
So I was going to ask you this, because obviously you're essentially training for long distance cycling. Mm-hmm. And I remember mentally when I first, and especially when I spoke to Seb the first time, thinking that I have to cycle long distance. I have to train for really long periods of time. And that isn't necessarily always the case.
No, it's less than you think it is. And especially, I do all my bike training indoors. I don't go out on the roads at all. So it's called a turbo trainer.
Yep.
You put your bike on it, you pedal inside. So
I also know that well.
Yeah, you've spent many, many happy hours on one. Happy might be an overstatement. It certainly is for me. But it makes your training far more efficient.
Yeah.
So they reckon it's anywhere up to 50% more efficient being inside. So those really long rides, so I'll spend 5 hours pedaling on the indoor trainer. You've done the same, but that's equivalent. You'd have to be going out for like 7 hours ish outside to get that same benefit. So in terms of, you've just got to be far more efficient, and you squash those training sessions in when you can. There are times I'll get up at like 4:30 in the morning to get on the bike before work, but then you've also got to prioritize your sleep. If you're not recovering properly, then sometimes it's better to have another hour in bed than actually get on the bike. And it's trying to work out your own body and how you feel as to what works for that, because everyone's different and there is no rule.
So where do you train in the mornings before you go to work, or do you train when's your preferred?
It depends on the session, weirdly enough. So if it's a really tough session, if I've got like a set of, say, like VO2 max, which are like really hard intervals, sometimes I prefer to get up first thing in the morning before I've had anything almost interfere with my mind, and just knuckle down and get on with them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the sessions are so hard that if they're in the evening, you almost worry about them all day, which is ridiculous. But they're always there in the back of your mind, like, you've got to go home and do this evening. Whereas actually a lot of sessions, if they are not easier, but I will still do most of my training in the evening, because I just have a bit more time in the evening.
And do you go to the gym at all?
Yeah, I have a gym membership. I swim at the gym. Obviously, you need access to a pool.
I was going to ask you about the swimming, because the swimming is it. I know that sometimes you do some outdoor swimming, so open water, I think it's what you call it. Yeah.
So in the summer, we do open water swimming, and people do swim all through the winter in all sorts of conditions. There are some really hardcore people out there who like literally crack the ice on the lake and go swimming.
Wow.
I'm a bit more, I say a fair weather swimmer. I'm not really. The race I did required a full thermal wetsuit base layer and balaclava, but we'll swim outdoors during the summer. So during the winter is all about technique work. So in the pool, doing specific sets to work on your technique to make you more efficient, and then in the summer you'll build the distance outside.
Oh, okay. And then the running, I mean, how do you prepare yourself for that? Because obviously I know that people who are training themselves for like a 10K or a London Marathon or something big, they will essentially, predominantly all their training is aimed at running. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they almost run far more than they need to. So between the run and the bike, it all works your aerobic system. You need to be really efficient aerobically. They both give you a great aerobic system. So actually you're far more injury prone doing a lot more running. So you pile more hours onto the bike, and then I'll probably do, I'm going to say only, but I think at most maybe 5-6 hours a week of running maybe. But that would be absolute max.
Yeah, and but that's actually quite a lot.
It's quite a lot, but in terms of mileage, it's nothing like a runner would do. It's nowhere near. So people who are like marathon runners, they can be doing like 50, 60, 70, up to 100 miles a week.
Yeah.
I would do maybe 30, maybe.
Yeah. But
most weeks actually less than that. I do kind of interval sessions during the week, so kind of like mile repeats, maybe anywhere between sort of 5 and 8k at sort of a threshold pace that you're really struggling with, and then one long run at the weekend. But the longest run I did in prep, bear in mind a marathon's like 42k, I think the longest run I did was 28. So wow. It is a long way to run. I'm absolutely not denying that.
That's a long
but
distance, yeah.
Relative to the amount you'll run during the race, it's probably not as far as you think it would be.
Yeah. And what would you classify as your strongest activity of the triathlon?
So it's probably a bit of a tie. So my swimming is not that strong. It's okay. I will get round, but it won't be pretty, and I certainly won't be anywhere near the front. My bike is pretty strong.
Okay.
I have a good bike. The hillier the course, the better I get. And then my running's a funny one. So my running by itself is not that strong. So you compare me to a runner, my times are nowhere near there, but I can run well off the bike. So in terms of triathlon, my run is strong.
Okay. So it's that, yeah, it's the kind of like, if you were just doing a marathon, you wouldn't be very good. But it's that combination of finishing the swim, then getting on the bike, and then once you've done that, you're still a very strong runner.
Yeah.
Which I can't understand how
so
you're still running after all that.
So I can still do it a relatively, I'd say, a decent marathon time, having come off the bike, which is where a lot of people sort of fall over, is that they'll push too hard on the bike. And most people for an Ironman, particularly their first one, will end up doing a walk-run tactic. So they might run for, say, 2 miles, walk for a couple hundred meters. Whereas I can quite comfortably run at a decent pace off the bike.
And did you, when you first did one of these and found that, because obviously I know what it's like when you find you kind of get to that point where you just realise, actually I can do this, and I mean actually I can hold this pace and so on. When you first did the triathlon and you realised that you could actually hold this tempo and you could hold this pace, that must have been a feeling that was quite bizarre, right? Because it's not just, like you said, it's not just a marathon. You've just completed a swim and a bike ride, and yet you still feel okay. Yeah,
it's an odd one. You're kind of, it's almost like a weird out of body. You're a bit like, can't believe you're doing this. This is just so bizarre. Like, you will be in the middle of the race and I'm like, I can't, almost even now, I can't comprehend an Ironman. I'm just like, it's just so far. It's such a ridiculous thing that anyone would do. But when you're doing it, I chunk it up into little bits. So I'm like, you do one lap on the bike, which will be, say, 30 miles, and I can ride 30 miles on a bike, that's fine. And then you do it again and it's fine. And then you get to the run and you're like, okay, so I just do 5k or 5 miles, and then you do the next one, and you just kind of keep going. Whereas if you sit there and went at the start line and went, right, I've got 140 miles to go, you'd never start.
Yeah, because I know we discussed a little bit about a half Ironman, but a full Ironman distance wise is, so you do your swim, which is,
so the swim is 2.4 miles, so 3.8 kilometers. The bike is officially 112 miles, so 180k. Wow. Really long way. And then you've obviously got a full marathon on the back of that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a long way. It's a really long way. I don't think before last year, I mean, I've never actually run a marathon by itself. I've done an ultra marathon and I've done it as part of an Ironman, but I've never run a marathon, and I still think a marathon sounds like a really long way. It sounds really tiring.
It's amazing when we went for that meal the other night, and it was just that case of just like, I physically can't comprehend how you guys, how you and Seb do it. For me, it's that case of, how can you cycle that distance and then run a marathon, forgetting about the swim bit at the beginning? It's just like, I can't comprehend how people do it, and I think it's incredible that that you do them still can't comprehend it. I think it has that daunting factor. But the one thing I was going to ask, Ironman is that it's predominantly male as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely there's far more men than women.
And did you find that had any effect, or is does it not have any effect in it being like there's more men running it, or?
No, I don't really mind it, but I know it is something that intimidates people. Does intimidate women, because it can be, especially the shorter distances. You get a lot of men who they think they're great. It can be quite a macho environment. People who are really pushing it. They, some total arseholes, to be honest. The longer distances are more friendly. So I think the longer you go, you have to have a certain amount of patience and understanding to go for those longer distances. It's not that real testosterone fueled, you just throw it all out there. You have to be paced. You've got to think it through. You've got to have a tactic almost and a plan. And if you don't follow that plan, you're never going to finish. And that's the thing with Ironman. In a short distance race, you might struggle, but you'll always get to the end. Whereas Ironman, you get it wrong, you just won't finish.
And I know that both of you have essentially raced in some amazing parts of the world as well. I know that we're going to be talking especially a lot in detail about the brutal part, but we talked about the other night about Lanzarote. And now Lanzarote, to most people, it's beautiful. They think sunshine,
cocktails.
But from what you're telling me, Lanzarote is one of the hardest.
Yeah, I think it's
up there due to the mountains, I guess.
Yeah, it's hilly. They brand it, I think, as the hardest Ironman. They've got, I think it's something like 2,800 meters of elevation on the bike. The run is flat.
Yeah.
Very hot but flat. They've also got brutal winds in Lanzarote. The gusts are, we went out there on holiday and the gusts will move me sideways by meters. So the bike can be absolutely savage. It's really hot. It's hilly. It's windy. It's tough conditions.
Yeah. And how do you find your transition from, because essentially we live in the UK, which is not the most hottest country in the world.
No.
But how do you find your transition from essentially going from, well, you just came back from Mallorca, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find your transition from essentially doing it all in a fairly cold country to find yourself doing it in a slightly warmer? Does it affect you in any way?
Yeah, I'm not great in the heat.
Okay.
I'm definitely prefer the colder races, but you can do like heat acclimatization, stuff like that. So on a turbo trainer indoors, you're usually covered by a fan. It's boiling indoors. I think most gyms are like 18 degrees maybe.
Oh yeah, so you say
they're air-conned, whereas like your living room, if you're sat there in like a t-shirt or a jumper and you get on the bike and you're throwing out like 200 odd watts, that is all heat and you are boiling. So a couple of sessions without a fan really helps you acclimatize.
And that's really horrible. The whole idea of not doing it with a fan. I don't
mind it too much. My shorter sessions, my intervals, I will often do without a fan. I'll be dripping, like absolutely, there's just so much sweat, but I almost prefer it in a way sometimes. Just personal preference. Not many people would. Yeah. But sometimes
I think it's that uncomfortable. Some people just don't like to sweat.
Yeah.
Where, you're doing it because that's what you need to do to get the job done. And it doesn't matter if you're sweating or not.
Yeah,
I don't care if I'm sweating or not. And then, so going back into our journey now, essentially, we're going to go back a little bit, but so you're finishing off the season of 2018.
Yeah.
And then we enter into 2019, and Brutal essentially wasn't the only triathlon that you did that year.
No.
Or 2019, this year.
Yeah, this year.
Forget what year I'm in.
Yeah.
So what was the first one that you did?
So this year I did Wimbledon, so that's a half Ironman. So we did it. So Seb was racing at Ironman Switzerland this year.
Yep.
So it was kind of his prep race for that. It was early in the season for me. I was still a long way out from we call it A race, the main race you're aiming for. I just did it for a bit of fun, but I got it horribly wrong. It was, it was a very cold swim. So I didn't think it would be that cold. I did so little prep. It was ridiculous. So I just went down. It was freezing cold water and it was quite windy and the swim took me a really long time. So sighting, which is essentially because there are boys out on the course and, you've got to pick your own route. You've got to get around the boys, but how you do it is completely up to you. And you obviously want to do the straightest line. It's absolutely not a forte of mine. I have got lost more than once in the swim where I've actually just been swimming in completely the wrong direction. Most people are far better at this than I am. But it just took me forever. It was a good 10 minutes longer than it should have been, which in that water is freezing. Yeah. And I then got on the bike, and swimming in cold water just drains your energy. I was in there for 50 minutes.
Wow,
so it's a long time in cold water. I got on the bike and I was cold, and I hadn't really planned my nutrition that well. I'd managed not to fill up one of my bottles with the energy drink. I think I'd only put half the powder in, so it was basically water. I should have had way more quick fuel. I had some kind of their tribe bars. People might have had them. They're fine for during the day. They're not okay for during exercise, which Seb may or may not have told me before the race, and I may or may not have completely ignored him and told him it would be fine. It was not fine. there also wasn't a feed station on the bikes. There's usually somewhere you can get food and more water and stuff like that. And to put it into perspective of how low my blood sugar went during that ride, I was literally hallucinating.
Wow.
It was like so bad. I was cycling up a hill and there was like these people's driveway, and it was like 2 rocks there. I was convinced they were goats. Like actually slowed down and like swerved out of the way of nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it was like I got enough on the bike and I could barely stand up. I was like shaking. Wow. I was really struggling, and I just shoved like so much sugar in myself. Like every aid station, which luckily they were quite close, was just like full sugar Coke, handfuls of jelly babies, literally just shoving it in myself. Yeah, literally just absolutely piling it in. And I was a state when I first got on the run. Like other people were passing me like, are you okay? Like I was literally shaking. But I kept piling it in, and by about 5k I felt okay. And just kept going, and absolutely from that point the rest of the run was great. It was kind of a trail run, which is what I prefer. So the run was fine, but I learned a lot of lessons in terms of the bike. Like you can't be blasé. If that had happened in a full distance, I wouldn't have finished.
Yeah,
I just about got away with it for a half, but it took me forever and a day. It was like the longest race.
And I guess these are they're probably the most crucial learning curves that you can have, because most people would have got to that state and either quit, not completed it anyway, or blamed it on the food, or blamed it on their coach, or blamed it on something just for a reason to stop.
Yeah.
So even, hat off to you for just even completing it, but it is that point where you can learn from it and go, actually, if I do make that mistake again,
you're done.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And then from there. So you finished that. You obviously took all that on board, and then you did another one before the Brutal, right? No,
that was the only race I did. I think the only thing that happened between then and the race, I went out to support Seb at Ironman Switzerland.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I think it was at that point. It's the first I'd never even watched an Ironman before. Had never been to a race, and I think it was that. The bike, people are okay. They're like smashing the way through. You can't really see anyway. They're pedaling away. Yeah. It got to the run, and it was a super hot day. Like I was way too hot just watching. I was like stood under an umbrella, being like, "Oh, this is quite uncomfortable," and I wasn't even moving. I was like just sat there feeling like, "Oh, this is too much." But that last almost sort of 10k on the run, when people were doing the last lap, people just looked awful. Like so many people running past, and they just looked like they had nothing left. They just looked like they were staggering around. And I was watching, and all I could think was, this last 10 miles I've got to run up Snowdon. And it put the fear of God in me, and I was like, I cannot be in that state at the end of the run. I've got to be, there's like fit enough to finish an Ironman, and then there's next level in terms of what I need to do. And it just absolutely just put so much fear into me that I think that was another really important learning and a real push for me to be like, right, you have to finish every session. You have to really push for it, because if I end up in that state, I'm not going to get through the medical. Yeah,
because so this is the first time you've physically seen people.
Yeah, I'd never seen people do one before.
And I guess, because obviously you don't see yourself when you run, and so that in itself, seeing people who obviously not smiling, they're not joking, they are pushing their body through absolute pain barriers galore. That would be enough to put some people off. Yeah,
I think most people would watch that and be like, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Why would you ever do that? But I think I just used it more as motivation of like, I actually found it's really inspiring watching people, because people will push to a level which you can't even comprehend. You watch them and they're in so much pain, but they just do not give up, and it's incredible to watch. I love seeing that. Yeah, and you think like, really, anyone think you'd just stop? You're pushing your body to such a limit. Why would you do that? But people just keep going, and it's phenomenal. And you think that mental strength, that's the difference, Ironman, is it's a mental game. Yeah. It's how far can you push your mind.
Yeah, and the thing is it's pushing your mind while your body is underneath that kind of pressure or in pain or exhausted. And that's where, even I'm a strong believer that your mind will go somewhere, but as long as your mind will go, your body will kind of follow. But I don't know how I would, I would do it even on a triathlon like that. It's just incredible. But then you came back.
Yeah.
Then having to prepare for your brutal race.
Yeah.
And so you literally went in guns blazing for this one. You were prepared. You were trained up.
Yeah.
You were all ready. You've learned all the stuff that you probably needed to learn.
Yeah, I think we'd done loads. Because the race is so long, you're going to be running in the dark. We'd done night runs to see how I fared with like head torches and stuff like that. I'd done an ultra marathon to see, how does your body cope with nutrition when you're kind of pushing that far and all of that sort of thing. We'd done loads of prep like that, just to try and make sure nothing would surprise me during the race.
And this is in Wales, right? So the whole event is in Wales, and the final part is to run up the mountain.
Yeah. So it's based in Llanberis. So it's the easiest route up Snowdon, as it were. So you swim in the lake, it's a cold swim. Yeah. It's really cold. So most triathlons you wear a wetsuit but nothing else, and usually gloves, extra hats and booties like little neoprene socks, they're usually banned during a race.
Okay.
During this it's all not only allowed but encouraged. Really cold, so you have to, it's about just under 4k, and it was in 4 laps, and you have to get out every second lap to get medically checked to make sure you're not getting hypothermic. It's that cold. And the weather on the day as well the start was delayed by 2 hours because the weather was so bad. It was like the winds were insane. I remember I was sitting in, one of our friends was doing it as well, and we both sat there in his van, and the whole thing was rocking just with the wind, and we're thinking like, this is gonna be great. Not in like a sarky way, like this is just gonna be, because by that stage you're ready for it. You can't wait,
because you're definitely not going to back out at that point.
Oh no way. And you went down to the water, and as we got in, it was like this torrential rain, like biblical, and you're all getting in the water, and I'm just thinking like, this is the most surreal thing I've ever done in my life. It was incredible.
So because obviously it's probably one of the biggest events that you've done. It was the outcome, which we're going to speak about now, it was amazing. But just so we can get a real kind of understanding about it all, total distances in it.
Yeah, so it's 140.6 miles. I think the swim is 3.8 kilometers. The bike was ever so slightly long. I think it was 185 instead of 180, and then the run was slightly short. So all in all, it amounted to just over, I think it's about 141 miles.
Wow.
In total.
And how long did it take you?
So it took me 14 hours and 45 minutes.
I do love asking that question, because when you say 14 hours, I think it's very hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
Because 14 hours of essentially working out.
Yeah.
Non-stop. It sounds brutal.
Yeah,
it's the name of the race.
It's savage, yeah.
And this wasn't 14 hours and you came last, because that's a really slow run.
Yeah.
Or really slow, run, but the whole thing. But that's 14 hours and you won the event. Yeah,
so I won the women's race. So nearly 15 hours. That in a normal Ironman, you're talking almost straggling at the back.
Yeah.
Your most cut-off times are somewhere between kind of 16, 17 hours for most courses. Yeah. The cut-off time for this was 21, just to give an indication of, it's kind of that next level in terms of difficulty. It's a lot more.
How would you keep going after like 18, 19 hours? I mean, that
yeah. Well, they do at the same time in tandem with the full distance, which I did. They also do a double and a triple. So you can do a double Ironman and a triple. So you're talking like some people are swimming 12K, they're cycling hundreds of miles on the bike, and then running 3 marathons back to back. So, you know, in terms of what I did on the day, it's not the hardest event out there.
Yeah. And I know that we talked about that you won it, which is an amazing achievement and like, you know, amazing. But I know that I've discussed with you before that you didn't actually know that you were winning the race. You have no idea where you were.
No, I had no idea at all. So I got off the bike, started running, and I think Seb had told me I was like 3rd or 4th or something overall, and I wasn't paying attention. I'm a very competitive person, but I'm very competitive with myself. Yep. So where I am in the field makes no odds to me because I'm already pushing as hard as I can. And in my opinion, if someone's better than me, that's great for them. You know, if someone's going to overtake you and they are like genuinely stronger and fitter and everything, I think that's great for them. I could never be annoyed at someone for just having, because, you know, they've put more work in. Yeah. They are a better athlete. So, you know, and I was just doing the run, I was going through, and I think when I went on to my final lap, I think Seb was like, "You're in 2nd," and I was like, "Yeah, okay." Like, off I went, trotted around the lake. And when I think it was so you have to have a medical check before you go up the mountain. So the kind of mountain patrol check that you've got all the right kit, that you're actually in a fit state to go and run up a mountain by yourself in the dark. And they were like, "Oh, you are the elite woman." And I remember being like, I was like, "What?" I was like, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? Like, I had no clue. And he was like, "Yeah, you're the first one heading up." And I remember, like, bear in mind, this guy's obviously got the results in front of him. We're all electronically tagged. Like, he knows. And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And, like, genuinely, he was a bit like, I think you are." And I was like, "No," and it just didn't. So I literally didn't register. Like, literally straight over my head. And I went off running, and there were multiple events running at the same time. So there was the triathlon. There was also a duathlon, which is a run bike run. Yeah. And 2 women were coming down the mountain towards me. So in my head, I was like, well, obviously I'm not first because there are 2 women here. So at very best, I'd be 3rd. That's what I thought. But it turns out they were doing a complete different race. They were doing the duathlon. Wow. They were nothing to do with my race at all. So I was just like, so like my parents were waiting just before the kind of turning off up to the mountain to basically show me where it was, because it wasn't particularly well signed in the dark. And I like stopped to have photos taken. You know, my mum was taking photos of me. As you do. You know, it's like my dad was like, "You know, you're in a race." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." Like, and I've got these like really cute little photos of me like in the dark, sweaty and smiling. And like at the top, you know, one of my lights had come a bit loose at the back. So I like stopped and got him to check it and do it. And I was like, it's just not like, didn't register at all. And I was like running down, and I was like just sort of coming to the last couple 100 meters, and I was getting quite emotional because I was like, you know, I've actually done this. Yeah. I'm actually coming up. And it was like that moment that it was all that work was coming for, and I was like ready to like burst into tears. I was so happy, and I like crossed the line, just like, "Congratulations, you're first woman." And I was like, what? I was like, really? Me? Like, I had honestly no idea at all.
That's incredible. What an incredible.
It's just kind of dumb, to be honest. People had told me and I just didn't listen. But it kind of made no odds to me.
And do you think not knowing where you were helped you, or do you think you would have pushed harder if you knew that, or you would have slowed down a little bit if you knew you were first?
No, I wouldn't have slowed down.
So it probably helped you, if anything, just... Yeah, I think taking pictures.
It's just for fun. One for the album. I think it's for the long distances, you've got to have a lot of self-control about that, because if you slow down, you're not actually doing your best. Yeah. It's not the best race you could run. And if you speed up, the chance of you completely blowing up is massive. So you've just got to stick. You've got planned paces. You know what you can do. You know how your body feels. You can't for me, it's you have your best effort, and that's it. Regardless of what everyone else is doing, it doesn't matter at all, because if you let your mind get ahead of yourself and think, right, I'm going to push harder to catch up or whatever, then the chance of you then not finishing and completely screwing yourself over is quite high.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it. You do the best job you can.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what anyone else is doing.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I love it when you. I mean, I've heard you tell me that you've won it several times, and I still love hearing it. I think it's an amazing feat to be able to win something that's that brutal, and something that I really can't comprehend. But where do you go now? I mean, what's your next kind of challenge? I mean, what do you see yourself doing next?
So at the moment, we're gonna do Ironman Lanzarote next year. So again, it's quite a hilly course, but it's very hot, really windy. So it's definite. It's not quite as hilly as the brutal, but it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
So give it a go, see what happens.
Yeah.
Probably do a couple of halves next year.
And your training for that starts in a couple of weeks, I think you said.
Next week.
Next week.
So
okay.
we've already started a bit of testing, a bit of swimming and stuff this week. Because you've got to have at least 6 months, if not a bit more, to do a proper build. And then I'll do next year I want to try and do 2 Ironman in a season. So one takes a lot of prep and a lot of recovery as well.
Yeah.
So this year I want to try and do 2 in a year, which I think will take a lot more out of me. So probably going to do an event called Challenge Madrid, which is another full distance. Again, it's very hilly, it's quite mountainous. But that's not until I think it's end of September, October time.
Yeah.
So space them out a bit and just see what happens really. I'm not in a rush. I'm quite young still. Most people for ultra endurance, you kind of peak kind of mid-30s.
Yeah.
I'm only 25. I'd much rather a lot of people then burn out, Yeah.
So you
I'm in it for the long game. I'm not in a rush.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And because I'm really quite excited to see what actually can pan out from this, because
I mean, I feel like everyone's very excited. It's got very high expectations. I'm just gonna give it a go. I mean, I'm really in it for the snacks.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's the mentality that I'm intrigued. I am about it. How you're, where most people, when they go into an event or a race, go into it as a race, where you kind of have this mentality, well, I'm just going to go in and do my best.
Yeah.
And even though your best is brilliant and it is proven to, that it's good enough to win, but you're still very down to earth. You're still very much like, no, but I'm just going to go in there. I'm just going to give it my all, and that's it. Because you focus so much on your training than the actual event itself. And I think a lot of people do it the other way around. Yeah,
a lot of people will not necessarily undertrain, but they'll get their training wrong. So quite a lot of people actually overtrain. They'll do way more than they actually need to, but not the right stuff. So they'll just burn themselves out, or they'll get injured, or people, they'll avoid the hard sessions. They can't be bothered. And some of that's having the right coach. Some of that's just prioritizing it and making sure, because it is a lifestyle, and making sure that actually you're doing all the right stuff you need. But I think there's often a lot of misconception about people. It's that I do it to do my best, and there's a lot of that. I think people do that, just try your best, and it's almost that almost patronising, just give it a go. You'll probably be rubbish, but give it a go. And I think it's that very different. For me, it's that I don't know what my best looks like.
Yeah.
I don't know what my potential is. But I'm absolutely going to give it 100%. And it's not just do your best in terms of I don't think I'm ready and I'm going to see if I can get to the end. It's I'm going to do my best and see how far it can take me. Yeah. So it's almost the same words that a lot of people use, but a very different meaning behind it, which 100%. I think is quite important. I think it's that mental game as well, that I think there's something... It's something like when you think you're done and you think your body is done, you're actually only 40% of the way there. And it's how far, and I will push myself till I black out. Yeah. I've done it before a few times on the bike. And I think that to me is that tapping into actually how far can I push my body.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I believe that people, I put it down to a free hurdle kind of way, that I think people get to normally the first hurdle, and that stops a majority of people. get to the second hurdle, and that's pretty much everyone done. And then you get that very elite that can get to that third hurdle, make it over, and then they just continue. And what people don't seem to realise as well is, especially like what we found recently in that challenge that I did in August, that actually the more you do and the further you go, the easier it actually becomes. We got it completely wrong. We thought that the Friday night was going to be the easiest one, the Saturday night, and then where we go, having a party on a Saturday night, and Friday was an absolute nightmare. And I think with that mentality of knowing that you can push past that 40%. Yeah. I think with that and the way that your mind is very relaxed, but because of the way you think, I think your potential's massive.
Yeah, I think it's habit, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
And I think there's a great book. It's called Superhuman by Habit. Yeah. And it essentially is that you focus on something and you make it habit till it's completely subconscious. Yeah. And it's the same. You do the same with all your training. It's unless you're actually ill, in which case you stop training. It's that rule that you'll start the session. If you get 25% of the way through and it still feels horrible and something's niggly and you are having a terrible day, then you can stop. Yeah. But most of the time you get through the warm-up and you're like, actually it's fine. It's that just getting yourself out there. And I think it's a lot of people focus too much on the end goal and don't focus on like, you just do this session today. Yeah. Okay, cool. Then you do this session tomorrow. Okay, you can do that. And it's that, it's all those little tiny building blocks that build something. Yeah. It's not, right, I've got to go all in. And I think I read something the other day. It's like most people massively overestimate how much you can do in a day, but you underestimate much you can do in a year. Yeah. And I think it's that. That's and I've definitely seen that myself. You think like today is the most important day. If I don't get through today, I'll never ever complete this race, which isn't the case at all. It's what you do over the whole year. If you hit 90% compliance with your training, that's phenomenal. Most people don't.
And what you're going to achieve through that is going to be insane.
Yeah, and it's those tiny little blocks that all build something incredible. But it's that I think most people don't focus on the little bits. They just look at the big picture, and if it's not all working out straight away really nicely, then it's not worth it. Whereas actually, it can take years, especially endurance. Most people are like, I've got 6 months and I'll train for a marathon and I'll do this one marathon and that's me done. And that's why you only ever do one marathon, is because you put yourself through this horrible 6 months of torture, try and push it too far. Whereas if you kind of take the time, you do it slowly, you build up, you learn to enjoy it, and then all of a sudden it's something you can sustain for a lifetime. And I think that's almost the mentality I've got to. And it's taken me a long time. When I first started, I was absolutely like, it is this session, and if I don't get through this session, it's all going to go horribly wrong. And you say massive tantrums if a session wasn't going well. Yeah. Whereas now, it's like, you give it your best shot. Some days doesn't work. Okay? Of course. That's fine. You don't need to throw things. But some days, you'll feel absolutely great. But every day, you do it regardless. And I think that's the same, I think, for everyone. You've just got to keep going.
Well, I think it's an incredible story. I think it's incredible to where most people, after having an operation like a hip, like having your hip done, I think that would be enough for people to go, I've got to take it easy. I think you've naturally just, you're firing out on all cylinders. I think potentially we still haven't seen the best of you yet. Really kind of, excited to see what the future brings and stuff like that. And then and for me, just so we finish off, but it's kind of like, obviously the people are going to want to, they may want to know a little bit more about you, ask questions. Where's the best place for people to find you?
I have an Instagram. I don't post a huge amount. It's something I need to get a lot better at. But that's just Natalie.Sowerby. Yeah. And I do, it's mainly triathlon. Yeah.
And I'll make sure I put all the links on this when we launch it all. But just to finish off, I mean, what is your final message to the listeners?
I suppose what I've learned through doing this is that you have a lot more potential than you think you do. It's almost that certainly for me, you're more scared that you are actually going to be really good at something, then that you're going to fail. I think the fact that I managed to win was more almost terrifying than like, if you fail, that's easy. Yeah. It's easy to make excuses, but actually you could be something incredible. And I think that is scarier than that. And I think it's just find out whatever your passion is. Doesn't matter what it is, but absolutely whatever it is, and go after it 100%, because it can only make you a better person.
Yeah, 100% agree. And and for me, Nat, I think you've been amazing. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I know that we go out and we talk about it. We can talk about it for hours, and I think that it's been really nice for the listeners to be able to hear that someone who essentially, was one point walking on crutches to then suddenly come back, and we're not just talking about someone just running, but someone to come back, swim, run, physically race up mountains. A woman. What?
It's fantastic.
I think it's an incredible motivating story. And, I think it just goes to show that if you put your mind to something and you train properly, you can achieve stuff that you don't actually know you got in you. And I think that's the amazing part of all this. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I hope you lot have all enjoyed this podcast. Quite happily say we'll be watching this space to see what Nat gets up to for 2020. But Nat, thank you for coming on, and we will all, and all of us from here, will speak to you very soon. Thank you very much.